Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's been a minute. Movies are my life. We are back with it. I'm very happy to be bringing this show back. Life got in the way a little bit, but I'm happy to be here. Happy to be back on the video store, talking about movies that impact us. As always, I have a guest with me. Tonight's guest, you know him from different trivia things. He has an MMA podcast, just all over the place. Mr. Aaron J. Aaron, I'm very happy to have you. How are you doing tonight?
It's good to be here. We've had to reschedule a couple times, like any good internet show. So, without further delay, I'm ready to talk about some of these impactful movies. Maybe one or more of these behind me makes an appearance on the list. No spoilers, though.
I mean, if people click on the video, we put the movies in the thumbnail, so you know what movie.
Oh, okay. There we go. Of course.
But, if you weren't paying attention to the thumbnail, you never know. You still could be surprised.
Exactly.
But anyway, before we get into the main meat and potatoes of the show, I always like to just start off with a little question. What is your earliest memory of a movie?
Yeah, and this was a hard one to actually think about because I had a few come to mind, but I honestly think my first memory of a movie that I can remember like really sticking with me is the opening for GoldenEye, actually.
Okay.
Which is interesting because it is the only James Bond movie I've ever seen still.
That's
at least all the way through. I saw the one with like the ice castle, most of that one, I think, as well. But like in general, I haven't seen a lot of James Bond movies, but I've always loved Pierce Brosnan. I also like an early memory was Mrs. Doubtfire, but I'm going to stick with GoldenEye here. And I just remember that whole opening and like I couldn't understand how he jumped off the building or into the dam and survived. I just couldn't understand any of that. I'd never like seen a movie before that I could remember. So I thought it was all real what I was watching. And yeah, I ended up watching the rest of that movie, not understanding most of it, getting scared a few times. And yeah, my first movie ever that I can remember. GoldenEye, and definitely kind of influenced my early watching. I watched a lot of action movies growing up for sure, and wasn't like not allowed to watch movies. But yeah, GoldenEye was my first memory around like 5 years old.
That's the question I was going to ask. Actually, is about how old were you at
5 years old? Yep, 5 years old. Yeah, about five. It was definitely around kindergarten.
That's very interesting though, because I always kind of like to hear when people kind of first start to realize that movies are movies, that they're not real. And so it's very interesting that for you,
definitely not in kindergarten. No.
Yeah, GoldenEye was very real for you at that point.
I can tell you the movie that made me realize that movies were movies and why.
Oh, okay. I want to hear this.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to take, but
no,
it was it was probably I was 7, 8 years old. I was chasing my brother around the house. And, I used to say a lot of phrases I'd hear in movies as I was chasing my brother around the house. And sometimes it was funny, like, let's see you do 90, you bastard, from Back to the Future, which, like, I got reprimanded, but my mom was like, that's funny. I said a particular line, if you've seen Die Hard 3 with a Vengeance. I'm not going to say the line for sure, but I said the sandwich board. Had no idea what I was saying. Just was running, chasing my brother, and I said, ba, ba, ba. And my mom had to sit me. She heard me. She was in the house when it happened. I had no idea, never heard the word before. It was just a fun word for me as a kid. And again, if you haven't seen this movie, you need to just watch Die Hard 3 anyways. But now you really need to watch it for this story. Absolute true story. My mom had to sit me down and let me know that movies are movies after that point. And what that word was, and never use it again.
Yeah. Wow. That's
100% true story.
That's intense.
Yes.
What a way to learn that movies are movies.
And because GoldenEye, I went into Die Hard and went down that route, went down Speed, all those movies. And then Die Hard 3 was my favorite of those. I love John McClane. I had no idea though. And that's how I learned movies were movies.
Yeah.
And what that word meant. Kind of.
That's amazing. That's That's a great story. Hopefully, that story doesn't relate too much into our first main question of the show.
I don't think
Maybe
so.
it could. Hopefully not. Anyway, your first question, as we always cover, is what is a movie character that you see yourself in?
Oh man. Yeah, this was a fun one to go through for sure. And I mean, right away for all three of the questions, I could have answered Wedding Singer in some form or another, just right off the bat. It's not going to be my answer, but that movie made too much of an imprint at a young age on me. And yeah, for sure. But there's a lot of answers I could go with for this one, but I actually did go with one that's made an impact on my life. I live in Washington, D.C. I work with dogs out here. I did not move out to Washington, D.C. to work with dogs. I moved out to Washington, D.C. to work a federal government job, particularly in with FEMA, with the Freedom of Information Act, which is redacting information, like aka blocking out information to give out to the media, was particularly what I was working with. Um, it wasn't exactly a dream job once I got into it. It sounded really cool. I had to work through a lot of interviews to get my top secret security clearance and everything like that, like 6 month worth of interviews and all this. Like they were interviewing everybody I'd ever worked with or lived with and things like that. It was like really intense and jumped through a bunch of hoops. But like I was working a job where like I had to do reports exactly how they wanted in the amount of time they wanted as well. And long story short, it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And what I would do every time when I left work at 6 o'clock for my soulless 9 hours there of doing the job just fast enough to keep their backlog what it needed to get the money they needed and it was just like every nightmare you could think of with a government job. And I put on this little movie called Brazil, and I didn't know anything about it. It's one of my best habits is I go into movies and I just don't know anything about them. I'm like, I think I've heard about this movie quite a bit. Let's go. I knew about Terry Gilliam a little bit, but this was my first Terry Gilliam movie. And the main character is Joseph Lowry. And he works a soulless government job and he's a daydreamer. He's a dreamer. He like goes into these wild, this wild world where he's flying free, in love, you know, just like all the things that he's not like colorful, just beautiful, just and not bound down by his soulless job and soulless kind of bureaucratical life. It was pretty on the nose, but it really did influence me after that to dream a little bit bigger than just being happy with what I was doing and not really enjoying it. And my life was pretty colorless too. It really did feel that way. Um, I ended up leaving my government job within 6 months of getting it. So like less than the amount of time it took me to get it almost. And I was just like, I told my boss, I was like, hey, Roman, this job is killing my soul. And I gotta leave. I'll pack up my desk. I'll be gone by the end of the day. Didn't take me long to pack up my desk. Took me like 3 minutes. It's nothing like the movies where it takes like a long time to pack up the boxes. And then I walked out, and as I walked out, I was walking on. The security guard like yelled, and I was like, "Oh, he's gonna say like good luck." He wanted my laminate back. I had to walk back. But back to Joseph Lowry. It was because of that movie I quit my job with the government, and now 10 years later, I have a successful dog business I've been doing for all of this time, and it's gotten better and better. I'm happy with my day-to-day life. Not that it matters to me, but I do better off than I ever could have in that government position. And it just, I owe it to a lot to this movie, honestly. And I always tell people I watch too many movies and it's why I quit my job. But it also is why I pursued what I truly cared about, which was animals. And I turned it into a full blown business now that, I wouldn't have had otherwise. And I owed a lot to that movie and particularly that character. I just responded a lot to him. He doesn't exactly win by the end of the movie. And, that's like not exactly the point, but just I really related to his overall ambitions and dreams in life. And they're more than just doing enough to get by. And I live in DC. I see it all the time. People just do what they're supposed to do. And, lived a comfortable life and don't really think about what they're doing. And I just wanted a little bit more. And this movie, yeah, was pretty much the reason. I really responded a lot to it. I'm like, I'm a government worker. It's a little bit on the nose, but at the same point, yeah, long-winded answer there.
No, that was perfect. But I have some follow-up questions.
Absolutely.
First thing I want to kind of discuss here, and it kind of ties into what we just talked about, because I want to talk about your expectations going into this job at FEMA. Because I wonder, you said you got really into, as a kid, you got into these kind of action spy cop movies. And I'm curious if you think that maybe had anything to do with some of your expectations for what you were going to be doing at FEMA. Because as you said, FEMA didn't quite meet what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I don't think it would be the action movies that exactly mess with my expectations as much as I would say the like political thrillers I watched later on in like college before I went into this job. Things like All the President's Men and things like just like learning about different things within politics that have happened that kind of make me wonder what we're hiding or what we're not. And I can't really say because of different things that I've signed and whatnot, and the work I did and the access I had to it, but it didn't disprove a lot of those kind of worries I had. And so for me, it was a lot of the critiques I'd seen about the government in film coming to fruition in what I was like fiction was looking like fact almost. So if that makes sense. So it was almost like disappointingly like what you expect a government slog type of job to be, it is what it became. And that was like the disappointing part of it. And I never expected to be like a spy or anything like going in there, anything like that. But yeah, I was like almost I had some ideas of what I'd be doing, but the year prior to that, I had worked in the field with FEMA Corps, which is a volunteer organization like Peace Corps, but it works in the States with disasters. And I was on the ground there, and not being on the ground and working within an office definitely was also something that I was not made to do. And needless to say, now in a dog business, I don't do it also. But yeah, I wouldn't say the action movies impacted that, but I would say other movies I watched along the way. And then once I saw Brazil, I couldn't really look at my job the same after that. And Brazil is a complete critique, basically a 1984 sequel when you look at it. And I was working a 1984 job if you look at it through that lens. So yeah, it's interesting to look at. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's interesting to think of, and I kind of want to talk more about this moment that you described of watching Brazil. Were you watching it at work or
no? I watched it after work. Right after work. Yep. Yeah, it was after work one day.
I want to hear more about this moment of you sitting down watching this movie that you'd never heard of. You were 6 months into the job at this point.
Yep.
6 months into this job, and were you already feeling a little bit like
yes,
soul sucked already?
Yes, completely. I was not contemplating quitting yet, but I was contemplating quitting, looking back at it now. But yeah, it was just one day after work. I believe that I'm trying to remember. I think I rented it actually through Amazon because I think it was like a Wisecrack Cinema that I had saw was talking about it. I didn't want to watch it beforehand, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna check out Brazil. Why not? I think I've seen this on some lists before. This is, mind you, like probably I don't know, like 8-9 years ago now. So I was 24 years old at this point, just getting out to Washington D.C. from Michigan. And yeah, I didn't have many friends or anything, and movies were my friend, like many of us at many different points in our lives. And there's nothing wrong with that at all that anybody watching is going to especially think. But yeah, I just immediately responded. I really loved the music and how much the music went against what I was watching on the screen. And then it just went into this chaotic, just chaotic mess from such a small mistake. And it just reminded me of like the drama that was happening at work from like a small mistake of someone using like not it's not like quite Office Space comical with like the TPS report like covers, but it basically was that in a lot of ways. And like it would be like, oh, why is this not working? Oh, we put the wrong, news organization and it's CBS, not NBC. And that slowed us down for 4 days. Like, so like in the movie, it's like one letter being off. It's Tuttle it's Buttle instead of Tuttle. And it's just like, or whatever the names are, it sends it into this tailspin. I was like, that's pretty accurate. So it got me like really early. I'm like, yes, this is crazy. So it's going to have my attention. I love crazy. I love whimsical. I just quirky, all the things that Terry Gilliam I learned does. So I've enjoyed, but it also, underneath it all, I don't just like weird. I like weird with truth attached to it. And that's what this movie completely had. And then it throws in like this longing of a love story, which I've always been a huge respondent to when it's done in kind of a not a cloyingly type of way. And I felt like in this movie, it was done really well. And in a way I could respond to, because at the time I had no prospects at all. And I could fall asleep or fall in love with the sight of somebody like the main character does in this movie. And kind of, I still am a daydreamer. I still am a dreamer in general. So I love dreamer characters. And I just think Joseph Lowry, to me, like, he is my favorite. So when I was watching him through this movie, watch him try to escape this existence, I really started to see myself in it. And when he didn't succeed by the end of the movie, somewhat of a spoiler, but not really a spoiler because it's not what this movie is about. And if you want to, whatever.
We're also allowed to spoil things on this
Okay,
show. Give you
cool.
free range.
Yeah. And so like it actually encouraged me to really, and I know this sounds stupid, but it encouraged me to want to change my path. I didn't want to fail going down this just boring path. So it encouraged me to want to succeed. And when I quit my job, I didn't look back, and I just really focused on the things that I cared about and the life I wanted to create for myself. And I eventually walked into dog walking, which walked into this whole other dog business that I now have a doggy daycare. I now have dog trainers. I mean, I have people who work under me. I've had people start their own businesses. Like, it's beyond what I ever could have believed or planned or dreamed, for lack of a better term. So, but yeah, it's really funny that this movie, I can really honestly trace back and thank for encouraging me to pursue a better life for me.
That is so neat. That I never knew most of this stuff about you, Aaron, but I think it's so neat that it really was a movie that kind of caused this whole shift in you. And I think what's interesting is we're talking about a character you see yourself in.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people, when they say, "Oh, a character you see yourself in," they take it kind of, "Oh, I really related to this person." You did relate to Lowry,
Yes.
but I think it's very interesting that you saw it almost as a negative at that point, because you felt just as trapped in the situation as he did.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like there, and that's why I said there's a lot of fun ways you can take this question. I can go very easy with like a Lebowski type of answer, sure, which everybody could answer, or a lot of these other, but it's like this really is inside, what helped create a big part of who I am, which what you do isn't all of what you are, but it's a big part of what you do. It's a big part of what you spend your time thinking about and how you create the rest of your life. So, yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I went that way, and I went that way pretty quickly. So I don't know what that says about me, but yeah, like movies have always been a big deal. And I have no problem with admitting that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I do also live outside of the screen. And if you don't, and you don't want to, that's your business too. Just like be happy and just leave people alone. Like whatever. Like but I do think that I have a balance with it. But at the same point, like I have no shame in saying that. And yeah, I revisit this movie all the time. I always love Joseph. He's great.
That is Just such an amazing story, Aaron. Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll get
Yeah.
into the second thing now, which is a movie that reminds you of a personal experience. Uh, Very interested to hear about this because this was
Yeah.
a movie that I had not seen before. So I'm,
Yes.
I'm curious as to how things tie in.
Yeah, so you're this movie is one that will grow on you for sure. You're coming to it a little bit early, but at the same point, I think you're gonna start to see a lot of themes start to peek out. It's so the movie's Old Joy, Kelly Reichardt movie. I love Kelly Reichardt so much. She's just my type of director. And many people's. I'm not saying I'm unique in that take, but this movie is just about two buddies in very, very different parts of their life who've been friends for a long time, going on a hiking trip. That and I just got engaged recently. It's one of the reasons we had to reschedule one of the times. And before I got engaged, I wouldn't have quite understood that. I would have been like, dude, you're getting engaged. It's not that different than anything else. Like it doesn't change your life completely. Um, but yet it kind of does in a lot of ways. And I have some friends when I'm at 33 who already have kids, already are on that stage of their life, and they're like, yeah, no problem. Other people, they're like, it's not for me. That's fine too. Other people, they're not sure. They kind of want it, but they're not with somebody. Like, and then there's kind of the other group that's like resisting the slow inertia that is aging and people growing up and not having as much time for the things from their youth. And that's what this movie's all about. And I mean, I've just had this experience countless times now as I've been growing up and going back home of people who haven't grown up or left home. And like it's just like I'll be like talking, about how I'm, starting to see someone and build a business, and they're like, oh, like, why are you, like it's just you have people who try to keep you who you used to be. And you're like, you want to stay like close to those friends, but at the same point, they don't really want to change or grow. And you have changed and grown. And it's just that kind of, you just hit that point where you're like, I care about you still, but we're not like friends anymore. And Banshees of Inisherin came out this year. It's a much more negative version of this movie, I think, in a lot of ways, where there's just kind of this, you know, he's constantly ragging on him for like things like thinking about his wife, thinking about his life back home, thinking about the fact that he can't just stay in the woods for like, a week here. And just like I just had a lot of experiences like that. And I just don't see a lot of movies that kind of represented in such a simple way between two characters like this. I hang out with like much more one-on-one than in groups. So for me, you don't see that presented in cinema as often and kind of in this way. So I really appreciate the movie for that. And just these characters are around the same age, and it's just from the generation before me, yet it's the same, same kind of struggles you have. Just now we have social media to kind of keep tabs on everybody a little more, but it's still the same type of thing where like making plans is a lot harder now for me than it used to be. And it's just part of the reality when you start to share your life with somebody or don't. And I mean, then without getting too personal, but my brother's not going to watch this show. I have an older brother. He's 4 years older than me. He's a great guy, but he got his heart broken one time back when he was in his 20s, and he decided no more, never again. I got all the emotion in the family. I'm like the romantic of the family. Like he just decided like, so he's, 38, turning 39 this year, still alone, not actively dating, not actively looking for anybody. And, like he even kind of gives me some shit about it once in a while where I'm like, I can't come back for 3 Michigan State football games this year when I'm moving to like Philadelphia or something. And it's just like, um, it's like sad but true. My brother is who reminds me of this movie. Um, and it's not a brother, it's not two brothers in the movie. And he's still my friend and he's always going to be my brother, but I'm outgrowing my older brother at this point, and that's weird. And this movie is, it's weird to outgrow your friends. It's weird to outgrow anybody who you're close with at any point. And it's, weird that it's my brother who this movie reminds me of. But yeah, it's just like when you have someone fighting like things that are very good for you and that you're choosing to do, it's just like kind of awkward. You're like having to explain those things to somebody. It's like not what a friend is.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Aaron, because as I'm listening to you, I kind of start writing up these follow-up questions of like things, because I don't want to interrupt you and I want to have you keep going, but
Yeah.
once there's a stopping point, there are things I want to bring up, and so I write them down so I don't want to forget them. And multiple times over the course of these two questions already, I've written something down, and then you've shared what I'm going to ask about. And I really appreciate how open you've been throughout all this.
Yeah.
But I want to hit a little bit more on, I think it's a really interesting dynamic that you're describing. Because, yeah, in the movie, it's two friends, but I think it's really interesting that for you, it is your brother.
Yeah.
Because I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but doesn't that kind of bring in almost even more of like kind of a conflicting dynamic because he
Mm-hmm.
will always be your brother,
Yes.
but that doesn't mean he'll always really be your friend. And yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had plenty of times in our life when we weren't friends. I mean, basically until he moved out of the house to go to college, we weren't friends. So, and our biggest bonding point to this day is movies. That is movies and sports. That is keeping our relationship alive. Because if we didn't have those things, when life things come up, it gets awkward between us because we just don't see eye to eye on life. We just don't. Like he's like a believer, like, he's just not a believer in the things I'm a believer in without getting too much into it. And like he just it's like, things that I don't believe are a waste of time, he believes are a waste of time, and vice versa. A lot of times. And that's why we just kind of I stick to the easier things like movies and sports to talk about, because when it comes to life stuff, we just don't see eye to eye on it. So it's just it's weird because like these points when I wish I had the name of the two characters, but it's really the less mature, more gnawing character is just going at him. He's just like, ironically, that's the stoner character. He annoys me more than the square in this movie. So like, and it's just like I've been there before where it's just like you're telling your friend, and the only thing your friend is, and this isn't exactly my brother, this could be other friends, but like you're telling your friend the only things they're glomming onto are like the negative or bad aspects, and then the good aspects they're almost responding to like the negative aspects they should be. And you're like, why am I around this person? Not my brother in that case, but that's how it relates to other people just overall. But yeah, it does make it much more complicated because he will always be my brother. He'll always be in my life. I know that no matter what, unless like no matter what. So, but it's different that he'll always be in my life, and I want him, and like I'm like seeking him out, and like he's feeding my life force type of thing. Like, and does make it a lot more complicated.
Yeah, so I kind of want to talk about the difference here between when you and your brother did feel connected. Because you did say that, like, at first when you guys were at your house, you didn't really have that connection. And then there was that point where it's like, oh, I'm finally feeling like I am connected to my brother. And then that faded away again.
Yeah, that's a good question. We had space for one. We both had matured a little bit, and in the movie, like the great line that incorporates the title of the movie, "Old Joy," is sadness is just old joy, and maybe that's what I'm feeling now is sadness for the old joy we had because we don't have that. Maybe that's what Zach is feeling. Like, honestly, and that's why I would describe people would describe my brother who don't know him as having kind of a sad presence. Like he's kind of sad. Like not all the time, like he can have a good time, but he needs drinks to have a good time. He's one of those types of people. And like he has trouble opening up to people, much different than I do. Like I'm kind of the opposite again in that way. Like if I can like oversimplify it, he would be alcohol personified. I'd be marijuana personified if I really oversimplified it. Like But yeah, sadness is old joy. And I think my brother has a lot of old joy in him, unfortunately. And, like all of his friends at this point have kids, they're married, and he's still got season tickets to his college football team. Old
Yeah,
joy.
one more thing I want to ask you
Again,
about.
revealing way too much, but he's never going to watch this. And
Oh,
like, I mean it with respect, and I have no
I
problem revealing it, but like, it's the truth. So,
one more thing I want to ask you about. You said that your brother, one of the things that you two connect on is movies.
mhm.
Have you told your brother to watch Old Joy?
Yeah, he would get nothing out of it. He would get nothing if I told him to watch this. We connect on movies, but the other interesting part is sometimes we really connect on movies and he nails it with me. Other times, like he really doesn't get why I love movies. And he just like thinks I like weird for weird, and like I'm just I I think he often thinks I'm trying to form my opinions into what other people's opinions are of certain movies, and like I like to be contrarian. I think he thinks just to be contrarian, and just like if it's a certain director, I'll like him. If it's a certain I think often my brother doesn't think I have a mind of my own. And with this movie, I I would suggest for him to watch it. I just don't think I think he'd be like, it was all right. Like he doesn't like this type of in-depth, like emotional movie. He's just like, what's the point of getting that in depth with your emotions? He wouldn't ever say that. He just does it, if it makes sense. He just like, and I am like the opposite. Like I'm not like over emotional, but I'm definitely emotional. I wear them on my sleeve. If you've ever seen me play trivia, you know that. Uh, and just about anywhere else, if you've watched this video, you know that. Like but I don't just do it to be like, look, I'm emotional. And I think my brother thinks I do it to be, look, I'm emotional. And I think a movie like this, he just like, it's okay. Like, I think he'd be like, nothing happens in it. And even though he watches a ton of movies, like, feel like, it's not. And so I would suggest it to him. I think it'd go in one ear out the other. I don't think he'd really sit with the message.
That's fair. Well, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Aaron.
Yeah, this is like a therapy session, free therapy. So thanks, Kevin.
I mean, I'm not saying I had necessarily that exactly in mind when I started the show, but that's kind of what it's becoming, and I'm glad that people have felt so comfortable.
No, this is really cool. Yeah, no.
So many of these things, and yeah, no, that was so interesting.
Yeah.
Pivot over to our third question: movie that gives you hope. With that, I'll let you reveal what the film is. But I found it very interesting that you chose. I wasn't shocked that you chose this film, but I was a little surprised
No
that
one
you
is.
chose this film for this answer. And I
For this
watched it
answer.
again today,
Mhm.
and I'm very curious as to why you chose this film for this answer. So go right ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of people would watch this and be like, that is really sad. That is very melancholy. Yes and yes. And also, yeah, it's Harold and Maude. Of course, it's Harold and Maude. I'm very proud that anybody who knows me associates me with this movie. This movie is my kind of soul for in movie form, and I didn't know until I saw it. And ironically, after all the bad mouth about my brother, who suggested this movie to me? My brother. He said, this is the most Aaron movie I've ever seen. And usually when he says that, I kind of resented it and it makes me kind of mad and I take it as an insult. But I watched this movie. I was like, wow, you are so correct. This movie is beautiful in every sense of the word. Harold could have been easily an answer I used for the character I related to as well. I was diagnosed with clinical depression when I was 6 years old, which, yeah, that's super fucking early, right? But that's when I was diagnosed with it. I was also diagnosed with ADHD at that age. It's kind of an age where kids were being overdiagnosed and overprescribed medications for things. I don't think I had clinical depression. Spoiler alert, just to get to the end of it here. I don't think I had ADHD either. I think everybody kind of has ADHD. But at 5 years old, the reason I got sent to the guidance counselor to do the ADHD tests was because I was banging on a typewriter that was brought into class. They brought in typewriters, and old typewriters, if you've ever used one, like has that pushback. Imagine being a kid, like it's fun to like, and I was hitting my hands on it. They said, this kid's too hyper, send him to go do the ADHD test. It's a bunch of things that if you gave it to any 5-year-old, they're going to fail and be prescribed ADHD unless they're a genius like you. Like seriously, it's like reading comprehension, like spatial awareness, things that like my brain wasn't ready for at 5, but was diagnosed with these things. It was like a lot like in Harold and Maude. Harold is like being put through all these depression tests and everything. Like his mom's like, what is wrong with you? Like you are acting out, making all these scenes. I was not suicidal, but this movie gives me hope because life and death exist together. They always will. My dad died at a really young age. I know this is going all over the place, but it all kind of relates to it. My dad died when I was 3 years old from a brain tumor. So early on, before I was ready for it, I was introduced to mortality, introduced to death, and came to, had to deal with a lot of these concepts before a lot of my friends, I think. And it, kind of forced me to deal with the concept of death and things like that at a really young age and kind of go through it and everything. So in this movie, it does deal with death a lot. I get that. Obviously, Maude dies by the end of the movie. But the things that are transferred through this movie is how important it is to live your life as you are alive and in the manner in which you feel you should live your life. And if you want to sing out, sing out. If you want to, go on, you be free, be free. And, that song just encapsulates this whole movie. It encapsulates how I try to live my life. I'm not trying to hurt anybody in the ways I am living my life and everything like this. I'm trying to live the best life to my ability and be me. One of the biggest arguments I ever had with my brother was when he said, you should act this way. And I said to him, and it seemed over dramatic, I was like, how about you stop acting? Because I don't have any interest in acting anyway. I have an interest in living. And like, for certain people, they're like, oh, like you can't live that. Like you have to at some points act. I don't. I want to live. I want to sing my songs. I want to play my music and dance into the field. And the entire movie, the build up to the end of the movie, everything about the movie is so overwhelmingly emotional. And then that just cathartic moment when the car goes off the cliff and you don't know if he's in it or not. And then you just see him playing his music and starting to live his life finally. It is the most hopeful ending I can imagine in a movie because we all can do that. And we all should do that, however it means for us. And it's so important. And I just we all die. It's okay. It's not a negative. It's a part of life. There's no life without death. There's no death without life. And there's no time that it's too late to start living how you want to live and being who you want to be. And it's just like Maude, they meet at a funeral, and it's just like she's meeting towards the end of her life, and she didn't want to live past 80. She stopped her life when she wanted to, and she had all that life left to live. And the definition of other people wasn't her definition. And it's just I'm not saying go and plan out when you want to die. Don't take it that literal, but just listen to the music, listen to the messages, and then go out and play your music and dance into the field, whatever that field is for you, whatever your music is. And it's just don't let anybody else define that.
Wow. So I have some questions about kind of the timeline of when you first watched Harold and Maude.
Mm-hmm.
When about was this?
This was, this wasn't even that many years ago. This was probably 2019, maybe.
So this was
like my late.
The reason I'm asking is because this is after you had quit your job because of Brazil.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's the reason I bring that up is because it's kind of interesting is that, you say that's kind of your philosophy of if you want to sing out, sing out. And I think it's kind of interesting because you were kind of living that philosophy before you saw the movie.
Exactly.
it's Brazil's story of how that kind of
Mhm,
woke you up, and you wanted to make sure that you were playing your music and dancing in your field, and working at FEMA was
mhm.
not that.
Right.
And I think it's so interesting that then this movie comes along, and yeah.
Yeah, I don't think if I would have gotten the message of hope at that point that it would have been the message I needed. I needed something to rattle my cage when I was
Mhm.
at FEMA, not something to comfort or something to like philosophize towards. Like I needed something more concrete, which I think in some ways, even though they're both very abstract, even though like Brazil's very abstract, it just was a little more of a noticeable thematic shake to my core, I guess. And this movie coming afterwards, it was like an encouraging, hopeful message that what I was doing was the right path and to further go down that. And, like I wish I would have saw this movie so much earlier. I can't believe I didn't see it earlier. I have suggested this movie more than any movie I've ever seen to people. Like it is a movie I hope everybody sees at least once in their life. And I feel bad for the people who just don't get it. Like, I know that sounds really, but like, just think it's just kind of a hippy dippy Cat Stevens music video because it is, but it's a lot more than that for me, at least, and a lot of other people. And yeah, I'm a very sad person. I've had a lot of sad moments. No, I don't think I have clinical depression, but I think I'm very in touch with sadness. I think it's an important emotion, and it's just I look at this poster all the time, and it's just I mean it makes me smile all the time. It's so darkly comedic. It's so just unlike any movie I've seen. Hal Ashby in the '70s is my favorite director of all time. Like it's he lived what this movie was about in his in for better or worse, but it's the truth. And yeah, I never get sick of it. It gives me every emotion, but the main thing it pulls through is hope at the end, and hope to be yourself. Like, and it's just like the most important thing is, like, and I just, the movie I think had its 50th anniversary recently, and maybe it's like 51 now. I don't know, but like, it's an incredible movie. And the soundtrack's amazing. Yeah, but that song, if you want to sing out, sing out. If you want to be free, be free. There's a million different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just it's one of those songs that yeah will always make me tear up when I honestly think about it. I just love Ruth Gordon, love Bud Cort
Yeah.
so much, and it's like yeah, it's just an incredible movie. That
Yeah.
yeah,
Before we kind of wrap things up in a bow, there's
of
one
course.
more thing I kind of want to touch on here. Is because a big theme of Harold and Maude is death, and you even touched on it about how it's kind of like this. We don't need to have death happens, right?
Yes.
And you don't need to have this fear of death. Live your life while
Mhm.
you're living it. As when you were younger, did you have this fear of death? And this movie kind of made you confront that.
Uh, so like I didn't see it young enough. I'd confronted my fear of death a lot earlier than with this movie for sure. I mean, I was like at 5 years old afraid of the dark because it would remind me of what eternity I thought would be like. So I'd always have to sleep with a light on because I knew my dad was dead. And I knew that death was coming one day for me, but I didn't know how to deal with it. So I like had like way early fears of death. And by the time I saw this movie, I'd kind of conquered a lot of those. I mean, you were always going to be at the core afraid, but at the same point, I more became afraid of like the death denying society we live in America, which I think is way more unhealthy. And I mean, I worked with the elderly with my social work degree, so I purposely chose to go and work with hospice. My mom opened a hospice when I was growing up. She never shied us away from that aspect, partly because my dad died when I was 3. I mean, I used to go to like family like support groups of other families who lost family members. You want to hear some dark shit? Go talk with the kids in those groups. Like we were beyond fear by the time I saw this movie. Like like losing a parent at a young age forces you to grow up pretty fast in that sense. And so, yeah, by the time I saw this movie, I was 28. So like, sure, we're always afraid, but like at the same point, I kind of dealt with those deep guttural fears. And I think that's why I was able to cut through from the first watch on this movie and feel the hopeful part and not feel the sad. As I did feel the sad aspects, but I would never describe this movie as a sad movie. Like this, to steal coin a phrase from another one of my favorite movies, this movie makes me happy sad. So yeah, shout out to Sing Street, another one of my favorites. But yeah, it's just, yeah, Harold and Maude, Cat Stevens, it's just everything about it gives me so much hope. And yeah, every time I talk about it, I want to go watch it. Like, I'm addicted to this movie. It's bad.
That is completely understandable. Aaron, thank you so much. This was a really
Intense.
engaging, like fascinating discussion. Thank you for sharing so much. I really appreciate how you were able to be so vulnerable and talk about really how, the show's called Movies Are My Life, and movies affected your life and reflected, and it's very fascinating. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you for the platform. And I mean, for whoever got to listen to this, I really hope that, a part of it reached somebody. And if it didn't, that's fine too. But, like, yeah, I think that hearing these kind of stories just further and, increase my enjoyment of film. I really love that you do this. I think that this is a great platform for people. And I had no idea what I was going to talk about today. So, that was kind of interesting. I always get nice and medicated before I come on my, movie shows. But yeah, I didn't know I was going to talk all about my relationship with my brother, the death of my father. But I mean, hey, movies are my life. And this is a great show. And I'd be happy to do it again. And whenever you want to do it, or if you need someone to interview you for this show, I volunteer to be the host on that episode.
That is fair. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. This is a fantastic episode. You reminded me why I wanted to get back into doing this show. So
kicking it off.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you to everyone for watching. Let me know if you want to be on, because I love doing these and I like to get a variety of perspectives and stories. You don't necessarily have to share as much as Aaron did, but
no, please don't.
Well, if you do, I appreciate it. But
yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. I really appreciate how much Aaron did share tonight. So thank you again, Aaron. Thank you to everyone for watching. Watch all the stuff on the video store. I'm on Multiplex. Aaron, what's the name of your MMA thing?
Aaron the Dog MMA. So AARON. Yep, AARON the Dog MMA. Go subscribe. Even if you don't watch you don't have to watch cage fighting. Just subscribe. I just want the number. I don't care if you watch.
That is fair. Well, thank you to everyone. Go out into the field and play your song. Have a good one.
If you want to be free, be free.